All right, so we will move on to our second public hearing, which is also related to the Marketplace. It is the development agreement for the Marketplace project. Can we have the staff report, please?
It's relatively painless. What? Do you need to do something?
Where do I get this?
Oh, excellent.
That was up and down. Yeah.
It's about state law.
All right, good evening, Commission. Here to speak to you about the proposed Marketplace project development agreement. And the purpose of the agreement is to secure the provision of 33 units of affordable, family-friendly housing, and in doing so, doing it consistent with the requirements of the Costa-Hawkins Act and the decision, the Palmer decision. Additional purpose is secure more immediate timelines for development to occur, including public improvements and amenities, in order for the developer to retain vested right to develop. And it's also to provide the developer certainty that the city's rules can't change, provided that the developer meets certain construction milestones. I do want to just note that I did provide on your dais there on your before you a 3-page memo with a red-line version of the development agreement, where we added some additional changes between when the packet was sent to you and this evening. And as I go along, I will touch on some of those revisions to the extent they're really of major substance. Most of them are sort of clarification. So the procedure with respect to a development agreement is that the Commission first considers the agreement and provides a recommendation to the Council. The City Council may then approve the agreement, and they would, if they do, they would approve it by an ordinance and authorize the City Manager to execute the agreement. There are a couple of findings that are required by law with respect to approval of development agreement. One, that the agreement is consistent with the general plan and any applicable specific plan, and that the development agreement is in the public interest. Additionally, the development agreement, it authorizes the city manager to finalize and implement agreements which will appear as attachments to the development agreement, which effectuate the abandonment and vacation of the current Shellmound Street alignment, and then the dedication and acceptance of the new Shellmound Street alignment, 62nd Street, 63rd Street, and Market Drive. The Government Code provides that the Planning Commission must make a recommendation to the Council as to the consistency of those dedications, vacations, those actions with the general plan. I think if you go to your general plan, and if I recall correctly, the policy, or I take that back, it's not a policy, but it's rather a figure 3.1 in the transportation element, really shows that Shellmound Street was intended to be realigned, and that there are new streets that we are calling 62nd, 63rd, and Market Drive. So I believe the Commission can easily make those findings. So there is a resolution that makes the required findings. Recommend that the Council adopt an ordinance and approve and authorize the development agreement. Also finds that abandonment and vacation of the right-of-way and acceptance of new right-of-way is consistent with the general plan. And we anticipate bringing the development agreement to the City Council at their regular meeting on July 21st. As I mentioned, The development agreement, it secures 33 housing units that will be affordable to low-income households. The agreement provides for a breakdown of 2- and 3-bedroom, 1- and studio units in parcels A, C, and D as outlined above. In total, we have 5 3-bedroom units, my math, 18 2-bedroom units, 5 1-bedroom units, and 5 studios. I will note that normally when we apply the percentage requirement for provision of affordable units, it's usually spread evenly across all unit types. But in this instance, we requested and the developer agreed that we would concentrate or have a larger percentage of the affordable units would be 2s and 3 bedrooms. So as I indicated, there are 5 3-bedrooms and 18 2-bedroom units. Again, with respect to Costa-Hawkins, the city may approve a rental project with on-site affordable housing units if the applicant voluntarily agrees to do so in a recorded agreement with the city to limit rents in consideration for some assistance provided by the city. And so the city is providing some assistance in accordance with the Costa-Hawkins Act to receive the affordable units now, as opposed to just receiving money, because there is a affordable housing fee, but the fee doesn't generate the type of money that we would need to actually create 33 low-income units. So the city's perspective, we would rather have development provide the units in their projects, and also that fosters a long-standing city policy of wanting to have the affordable units sort of dispersed throughout the community in amongst market rate units as well. So the city would provide, pursuant to the development agreement, assistance in a few ways. First, I will note that we've talked a lot about, with respect to your approvals on parcel C and D just now, the compliance with the family-friendly design guidelines. And in fact, in accordance with our own regulations, the family-friendly design guidelines really are not applicable to the public market project. But notwithstanding that, the developer has agreed, and as they've come forward in good faith and processed their applications, complying with the design guidelines. And they've also attempted to provide the number of 2s and 3-bedroom units that, while that has been discussed at a study session between the council and the commission several months ago about trying to achieve at least 50% of your units as being 2 and 3 bedrooms, those sort of numbers do not exist in any current regulation. So taking that 50%, 40% 2-bedroom, 10% 3-bedroom, what we are providing for is that the number of 2 and 3-bedroom units in parcels A, C, and D would drop back down to that 50% level. So for parcel A, you would, instead of having 91 2 and 3-bedroom units, you have 84. Parcel C would go from 38 to 34, parcel D 117 to 113, and so overall you would have a reduction from 246 2 and 3-bedroom units to 231. As a result of sort of reducing the number of 2s and 3s and exchanging those units out for perhaps 1-bedroom and studio units, then the total number of residential units that can actually be developed on a parcel increases slightly. So on parcel A, it would increase by 1 unit. from 167 to 168. You haven't seen that application yet. Parcel C would go from 66 to 68. Parcel D would go from 223 to 226, so you'd have an overall increase of 6 units. With respect to family, what we term family flexible units, and what that refers to is a desire by the developer to have some relief from having to comply with a guideline that, as I've already mentioned, really doesn't apply to their project. But the guidelines, and they are specifically design guideline J52, 53, and 54, that they would be have the ability to have some greater flexibility in terms of meeting those policies as to a certain percentage of their units. In the initial staff report that I provided, my sort of math and my own interpretation of the language that was in the development agreement indicated that there would be a total of 29 such units that would be afforded this flexibility in terms of application of the design guidelines. In fact, after looking at the language closer, it would actually be 58 total units. That said, when I caught that miscalculation on my part, we did have some additional discussions with the developer, and based on the work that they've done as to Parcel D that you just approved, and I'm going to turn around. Are we still good to go? Yes? Okay. So what we had indicated in the revision that you'll see in the development agreement is that the percentage of units in Parcel D that would be deemed family flexible would be reduced to 1.5% of the total units, which is essentially 3. So overall, you'd have a total of 30 units out of the development of the 3 parcels that would be afforded this flexibility in terms of their compliance with those 3 policies. Other project issues that are sort of addressed in the development agreement, as I said, there's will be an attachment to the development agreement that deals with the exchange of property, the dedication of property for the streets, as well as an improvement agreement with the city relative to construction of the streets. Those agreements will follow and are sort of tied to a tentative map application that you have yet to see that's intended to come to you in August. So the Commission still retains the discretion consistent with the authority under the Subdivision Map Act and the city's policies relative to its review and approval of that tentative map when it comes to you. And then, as I say, associated with that, these agreements would then provide for those property dedication, those property exchange, and provisions for the improvements. Additionally, when the development agreement goes before the City Council, we're intending to bring forth a couple agreements dealing with the expansion of Christie Avenue Park. There's a property agreement related to the dedication of the property as well as the improvement of the park. The development agreement also deals with the pedestrian easement that currently exists across what we know as Parcel A. There's an easement such that people getting off the tower can cross that property and get to the public street, Shell Mound Street. So that easement needs to be relocated as part of that development, and so the development agreement allows for the city manager to finalize the negotiations of that agreement within certain parameters that are laid out and spelled out in the development agreement. The development agreement also With respect to public art, it allows for the creation of a public market art master plan. So rather than necessarily having public art being done parcel by parcel, there's an ability for the developer to sort of aggregate all the money that would otherwise be split out, aggregate it, come up with a plan, sort of vet that plan with the Public Art Committee, and then implement that plan over time. The plan would be required to be prepared and presented to the city, I believe we said within a year after occupancy of the first building. The term of the development agreement is dealt with in Section 5. It's initially 12 years. It does provide for essentially an extension of 3 years based on sort of what one might normally refer to as sort of force majeure provisions, if there's riots and strikes and things of that nature, litigation which delays it, but there's a maximum period of an additional 3 years. There are construction milestones that are set forth in the agreement, and again, there were some revisions to that are in your supplemental memo that I provided to you. And these construction milestones are in place, and what they do is, to the extent that the developer meets those milestones, they continue to retain the benefit of the vested right to build without the city changing the rules on them. So Christie Avenue Park must be completed within 5 years. There's also a provision that sort of ties the completion of Christie Avenue Park within a certain time frame of occupancy of their first, whatever their first building is, be it a residential building or commercial building, but on the very outside it must be completed with 5 years. The developer must also substantially complete construction of either a second new building or the Shell Mound realignment within 5 years. The developer must complete construction of the next new building and the Shell Mound realignment with 8 years. And then we've also indicated that construction of a building on parcel F does not qualify as a building for purposes of meeting the construction milestone and retaining the vested right. The issue is that building F is a very small building, and so they could find themselves coming up against a deadline, and it would take a very small investment to go build a very small building to retain the vested right. And from the city's perspective, we want to see them to actually provide some substantial investment to retain that right. So we parsed out parcel F that doesn't qualify as a building. Vested rights with respect to what the developer is obtaining. They are granted the vested right to develop and construct in accordance with the project approvals and subsequent approvals. The project approvals are a defined term. They do include the FDPs that you've approved. Subsequent approvals obviously would be subsequent FDPs, the tentative map that you will see. It also provides that there's no changes to the city's policies or regulations that will apply to the project, which would purport to limit permitted uses, density, intensity of use, height, size of buildings, impose impact fees that aren't otherwise in place at this point in time, limit the timing, phasing, or rate of development of the property, limit the location of building sites, grading other requirements, or increase parking requirements. So again, the notion is that they know what the lay of the land is for while they're developing. The developer does agree to obviously pay when due any fees, taxes, assessments, impact fees, and other monetary and non-monetary exactions required to be paid in connection with the project. So those fees that you've imposed by conditions of approval, impact fees that we have in place, and they also would agree to pay any new increase or modified taxes, assessment, impact fees that are uniformly imposed, and they're required, reasonably necessary to comply with the requirements of federal or state statute or regulation, which is enacted after the effective date of the agreement. And again, they have to be uniformly imposed across, the entirety of the city, not just on them. And obviously, they agree to pay all the processing fees, application, permit processing, plan checking, etc. For 5 years after the effective date, they do agree to pay all impact fees in existence and at the rates in effect as of the effective date. So think about your park fee, your traffic impact fee. So they will pay those, and they will be subject to the adjustment that's already built into the impact fee program. So there's an automatic adjustment that goes into effect every July 1st, and it's based on the Engineering News Index, if I believe that's what it's called again. And so those increases, they will be subject to that. After the 5-year period, and so essentially they've got this sort of freeze, a quasi-freeze on fees for 5 years, and that sort of coincides with, as we looked at the construction milestones, they're really looking at a 5-year window to really do a big portion of a lot of what you've been looking at. And then after that 5-year period, the city can charge, new fees. Obviously, they're applied generally to everybody. With respect to environmental analysis, as Maru indicated on the FDP for Parcel D, the council did certify the final EIR for the project back in July 2008. The final EIR was applied to the project, and the city did adopt findings of fact, mitigation measures, mitigation monitoring reporting program, findings of fact concerning alternatives, and a statement of overriding considerations. We did also, into this report, we didn't want to double up the paper that you got for the FDP for Parcel D, but we do incorporate by reference the environmental checklist that was provided for the Parcel D FDP. And again, we believe that there are no substantial changes in the project or the circumstances under which it will be undertaken, and no information of substantial importance exists which would require preparation of a subsequent EIR. So at this point, if you have any questions, we can, after that, open the public hearing, take public testimony, and after that, we are recommending that you adopt the resolution recommending the council adopt an ordinance approving the development agreement, and also recommending that the abandonment and vacation of the current right-of-way and acceptance of the new right-of-way are consistent with the general plan.
Can you explain I'm a little unclear on the assistance that the city is providing pursuant to Costa-Hawkins?
There's a reduction in unit.
The assistance that we're providing is we're reducing the number of, quote, required 2- and 3-bedroom, or actually the number of 2- and 3-bedrooms that in your Parcel A and Parcel D FDP, they were providing more than 50% of 2s and 3s, and so they're going to reduce that back down to 50.
So the unit mix was specifically called out in the PUD?
In terms of the total number of units, yes.
The ones that that includes the one we just approved with the unit mix.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Wait. So I'm just. Where is the unit mix requirement? Where is that coming from? That's what I don't understand.
The unit mix requirement, the 50%.
Yeah.
that's this notion that the Planning Commission and the City Council discussed several months ago. And that will be, at some point, coming back through the Commission and to the Council to actually be codified as an ongoing requirement for development, residential development projects. And what you have seen so far for parcel C and D is a provision of 2 and 3 bedroom units that are in excess of 50%. And what this agreement does is it allows them to ratchet the 2s and 3s back down to 50%.
In exchange for?
In exchange for providing affordable units now.
But we're providing assistance for a requirement that doesn't exist?
That's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, basically.
Okay,
Yep.
Because we want the affordable units.
okay. I just don't see how that's assistance, but, all right.
And then additionally, by reducing the number of 2s and 3s, it allows for the previously approved unit count. So like for parcel A, there were 66 units. That goes up to 68. And then parcel A, which you haven't seen, the plans that are being developed are at 167 units. They would go to 168. And then parcel D, which you just approved, was 223 units, and that would go to 226. So the assistance is they get essentially 6, if I'm not mistaken, additional units.
I think we should advise them not.
And what's the current affordable housing fee?
Oh,
The current affordable housing fee is $20,000 per unit. And you have roughly 400 units, so that's about
50, I think.
somewhere in the neighborhood of about $9 million. And I can tell you, from
33
experience, you will not develop 33 low-income units with $9 million. So that, the purpose of this agreement, which is a recorded agreement, is that we get something, and in exchange we give something. And what we're giving is, as you've pointed out, sort of relief on something that we didn't, arguably don't have the ability to impose right now. Okay?
right, but we're also, so,
And then
I just-
the last bit of relief is on a small percentage, essentially 30 units out of the total 400 and some odd units get relief from Friendly Design Guideline J52, 3, and 4.
okay. So, I mean, I understand the notion of a development agreement being sort of a give and take, sort of, negotiated agreement, but it seemed to me what you were saying in your presentation was that because of Costa-Hawkins and the Palmer decision, in order to, we're doing this agreement to secure these 33 units, and I get that much, but in order to legally do that, we had to provide some sort of assistance. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Thanks. Would the applicant like to, or I guess, well, kind of the city is the applicant, but would City Center or anybody associated with the marketplace like to say anything?
Good evening. I'm Mark Steffen, president of City Center Realty Partners. Just would like to say that we've been working with Mike and his team, and we think it's a good trade-off. What he's presented to you, And we look forward to moving this along. And actually, we really look forward to is getting started on the development and building the retail and the residential. And this helps us move that process along. And if you have any other questions, Tamsin, our counsel, is happy to answer as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If anyone would like to speak on this item, please come forward. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll bring this back for deliberation. I'll just say, does anyone have anything to?
I'd move approval.
Second that.
Okay. I'll just say I didn't realize until right now, but I think I have this hang up on this. If without knowing more about Costa Hawkins, this just doesn't seem like assistance. It doesn't seem like we're providing assistance to me. So without knowing more about that requirement, I don't think I can vote to recommend this.
Well, we've already approved plans, and we're saying now you can increase the number of units that you're providing over what we approved, so that's assistance.
That argument I can buy.
And there's other,
does
I mean,
make
there are
sense.
other minor items of assistance in here. So I don't know if there's a certain threshold over which the assistance needs to exist, but there is there's some assistance in here. I don't know.
We should vote.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, let's vote.
All right, ready to vote then? Commissioner Cardoza?
Aye.
Commissioner Donaldson?
Aye.
Commissioner Gunkel?
Aye.
Vice Chair Tan?
Aye.
Chair Moss?
Aye.
5 ayes. The resolutions are approved, and we will forward, or the resolution, I should say, is approved, and we'll forward your recommendation to the City Council.